So what we have is we have these representations of enlightened body, speech, and mind. So a Thangka can sort of represent that. So it's a Buddhist art, and preserved the Himalayan region more or less. But it existed in Nepal. The Newari people have a rich tradition of Thangka painting, really amazing. I'm sure they had something in India. But the Thangka itself, the word is a Tibetan word. They'll paint various Yidam deities, Buddha Shakyamuni is there, and various yogis, and different images, Buddhist images. And they function as an object, I guess worship was the word you're using, to worship with. In Buddhism, this is where it gets a bit tricky, because I think some people, if they see someone bowing to a statue or a painting, they assume we're bowing to that. No, it's symbolizing something for us. So we're trying to, again, engage in a kind of virtue, and also accumulate what we call a merit, or accumulate conditions for our own liberation through making offerings to these kinds of things. Actually, painting a Thangka is an act of that. All those kinds of things. So they function as that. They also function as a reminder for people. When you create your environment, I was talking to someone recently, I'm just going to put it into this context because some people might not be able to relate to the religious aspects. In our world now, we live here in America, where we put ourselves and what environment we're surrounded in affects our mind, it affects our emotions, it affects how, when we see a billboard every day, and we drive through a city and see many billboards, or whatever we see, our environment affects us. So in Buddhism, they've taken that into account, and so they, the idea was to augment the environment in order to create a rich space for people's minds to turn towards the Dharma, or to turn towards the truth of the nature of things, and to turn towards virtue. So essentially, a Thangka functions as that too. Yeah. So it has all these. You can see has multi dimensions to why it's sort of done. Yeah. But ultimately, it's a symbol of. So, for instance, Buddha Shakyamuni is our founder of Buddhism. So he's our main teacher. So it reminds us when we see an image of Buddha Shakyamuni, when we make offerings, it connects us to him through devotion. It connects us to his teachings, and similarly, it reminds us of our own Buddha nature. So this is what is, from a Buddhist perspective, is something that is fundamental or intrinsic to all sentient beings. No matter how crazy that being looks, they have the Buddha nature here. So that's been a wonderful thing for me. So for me, a window in, because I don't relate to, believe it or not, I'm a monk, but I've always had a little bit of a rub with organized religion, as a lot of us do, especially my generation. And so my window in for a lot of this was finding, well, what's the essence? Like, what are we trying to get at here? What is the purpose? So a lot of times we get quite black and white in our culture, and we just see one surface thing, and then if we don't agree with it, and we have a bias towards it, we immediately throw it out, instead of really investigating, well, what's the essence of that? Similarly, like something that looks really attractive, we don't investigate the essence, immediately we buy it. You know what I'm saying? Or we engage with it, Like for me, it's like if I see a really delicious frozen yogurt picture, okay, I don't even investigate it. But it's really actually it's a fault not to investigate it. From my perspective, I'm taking the fault. So what I'm trying to say is that for me, the window in when I see Thangkas like this was to remember the inner meaning, which is my own Buddha nature, and that we also have the qualities and the potential for enlightenment. So it's also, when we bow to a picture or a statue, or make offerings to it, we're also bowing to our own inner awake nature. Do you see what I'm saying? In its potentiality. Yeah. So it becomes, that's where we have, you don't ignore the outer level either. It's just that it has all these multi-dimensions. And so for me, as sort of a younger person entering it, and I guess I'm a millennial. I was 1980, right? I'm just right on I'm barely a millennial. So for our generation, it's, this was my window in, because for me, if somebody just presents me with do this, the Buddha said so, it's not really nowadays I have a lot, I have more faith, so it's okay, usually. But I need to know, okay, well, what's going on here? Why is What's the inner meaning behind this? And when I do that, it doesn't just help me with my bias. It also like really connects me to the practice, and then connects me to what I'm doing here. What's the path? Why am I even doing this? So that's been super helpful.